Welcome back to the Jameson Files. I'm Carrie Weber, and I'm your host. I'm excited to have you back with us for this episode. This is a special episode of the Jameson Files where we will be focusing on some quick fire topics with one of my friends and colleagues, Dru Halverson. Dru, thank you for being with me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Dru is our longest term team member on the Jameson team. Actually started with Jameson in Dr. Jameson's practice as his dental hygienist and came on board to work with Kathy when she first started our company as the first additional advisor to the team.
Yes,
so
long ago.
We've been through a lot together.
Dark ages, yes.
So something that we had talked about over time when we were considering content for the Jameson Files episode was some of these frequently asked questions and areas that we work on with our own clients for their practices and how we could use this platform to help more people as they're working through these areas in their businesses. So I want to do some of these quick fire series with you for
Perfect.
The podcast, and want to start with something that is really important to us at Jameson when we work with our clients, and that is the monitoring of the progress of the practice.
Right. Where do you stand?
Right. Where do you stand? What we call the key performance indicators in business are those KPIs that you typically any business is monitoring in some way, shape, or form. Or not.
Right.
But those can take a lot of forms in different businesses, and especially in dentistry. I actually just did a webinar recently for Jameson talking about what we consider the critical factors of the business of dentistry that Kathy Jameson really put into play for us some years ago. But it can be so complex. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be, depending on how much you really focus your energy on the health and well-being of the business, working on the business. So you and I were recently talking about something that you see a lot because you have, being with us all these years, you've been in a lot of practices.
I've seen a lot.
You've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of things. And the understanding and focus and intention on where you are, you know, in your practice, in the business, is something that tends to fall by the wayside a lot. Would you agree?
Definitely. Well, we work in our business.
Yeah.
We work on the patients. We take care of the patients. We do the procedures, but we forget to work on the business.
Right.
And the only way we can work on the business is to know the statistics or the KPIs.
Right. And we could spend a long time talking about what those KPIs are, but one of the ones that we just were speaking about today is where you are in the relationship with your patients. So patient retention and the patient, where do you stand with your patients today? Can you kind of tell me a little bit about what you see in practices and what you really encourage them to keep an eye on in terms of what would be KPIs, so to speak, when it comes to the patient relationship?
Sure. There are mainly 4.
Okay.
So you need to know how many patients are coming into your practice, new patients, returning patients. You need to know how many patients are leaving your practice for any reason, and you need to have those reasons in place, because if you don't know those and don't ask those hard questions, then you don't know what to work on for the future. And then there's hygiene retention. You need to have 80 to 85% of your patient base, active patient base, involved in hygiene retention. And that system needs to be working all the time. And all of the patients that are in hygiene retention need to be current. They can't be past due. And then the treatment retention needs to be 80 to 85% acceptance. And it needs to be worked every month for 4 solid months on a person that was diagnosed or re-diagnosed with treatment that last appointment. So those systems are really important and those KPIs are important to look at.
So how many patients are coming in every month? How many patients are falling out every month?
Yes, and you have to have a good grasp of your active patient base.
So that active patient, so that's kind of a fifth one, but the hygiene retention and the treatment acceptance really makes up that active patient base in a lot of ways. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely.
So how do you, if someone is listening to this and goes, oh, well, I was really proud that I was tracking production this month, where would you recommend that they start if they say, okay, I get it, but where do I start? This overwhelms me. Where would you begin?
Well, I think just finding in your software program the numbers that you need to look at. And most software programs are going to track the new patients coming in, because once you enter the patient into the computer system, it's going to mark that as a new patient. You need to look at the new patients that are coming in, but you also need to know what kind of new patients are coming in.
Right.
Are they insured? Are they fee-for-service? Are they an emergency patient only, or are they converting to a forever patient?
Right.
Are they young children? Are they older adults? You know, what are your patients that you're attracting? You need to know that for a lot of different reasons.
Right. And when you were talking about the treatment acceptance, you said you need to be working on that for 4 months after the diagnosis and presentation. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that?
Sure. So when a patient comes in and they're diagnosed, if they don't say yes to the treatment that day, face-to-face, then your treatment retention coordinator or a team member needs to be chasing that pending treatment for that patient for approximately 4 months. So by the end of that 4 months, you should have them moving forward with either part of their treatment or all of their treatment. If they don't say yes to any of that treatment by that 4 month time, then they're going to fall out of that treatment retention system and then fall into the hygiene retention system, because something happened. We didn't create enough value for the treatment that was needed. They didn't see it. They didn't see the need. They didn't have the financial time spent with them to get a clear financial arrangement made, and they just didn't get it. They didn't get the yes.
Right.
So we need another chance in the clinical area for them to say yes to the treatment.
Right.
So we'll get them back in for the hygiene appointment and then start all over again.
And that really supports, what we say a lot when it comes to your case presentation systems and processes in your practice is it's all great if you have great processes that lead up to your initial treatment presentation. But if you have no processes in place for follow-up, you're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. Synchrony Financial even has a study that says that people take upwards of 69 plus days to make a dental purchasing decision. So when you think about that, if that's true, which the consumers are telling them it is, if you have no follow-up for those 4 months, that certainly does fill that 4 month window of when they're still making considerations of how they would like to proceed.
Definitely.
So it's important. So that's one thing to think about, is to look at that treatment acceptance piece in the patient relationship. Do you have processes in place? How long does it seem to be taking? And having those conversations as a team of how can we do this better?
It's always a surprise to every practice that we work with when we pull up how many dollars are out in pending treatment. So when we look at the pending treatment that is incomplete or unscheduled, or even scheduled but yet not complete, that amount is always much higher than what they ever thought it would be. And so that opens their eyes to, oh my gosh, we've got to get some work into the system to get our acceptance up to 80 to 85% treatment acceptance. And it's always miraculous when somebody just puts a little effort into adding value at the appointment, having a consultation face-to-face, doing a financial arrangement face-to-face, then you get that higher acceptance, and that makes a difference. So the KPIs are just a good way to measure what is being successful and what isn't. And when you focus on it, it will even make a difference. Even though you haven't done it before, it will start to make a difference that first month.
And having the entire team involved and aware, how do you find success with the practices you work with, and really engaging the team and making it a priority that everybody is aware of those important numbers or KPIs, indicators in the practice?
I love to have the teams look at those statistics at the team meetings. How many, how many patients came through this month that needed treatment? How many dollars were involved in those treatment plans? And how many of those are moving forward? How many patients are moving forward? Those are very important numbers for everybody to understand monthly or bi-monthly, whatever you're doing for your team meetings. But also, I have found that, and we at Jameson have found that if you look at the treatment that was diagnosed yesterday, and then how many people said yes to treatment that day and have scheduled for the future or they're moving forward, and you do that at your huddle every day, that really gets everybody pumped up.
Right.
So you're looking at smaller numbers on that daily basis, and that really, instead of waiting a month to talk about it, you're talking about it every day, not spending a lot of time on it, just giving some overview for that next day. Yesterday, we diagnosed $6,000. Of that, $4,500 is scheduled for the future, and they have signed financial agreements. Everybody was excited. The other treatment, I'm going to be following up with them in a couple of weeks. That's all you need to say. That pumps everybody up and gets everybody excited that they're going to be able to take care of those patients and to get those patients healthy.
Right.
I talk about money and I talk about care and health care. It's not all about the money, but if you're generating the income, then that tells us that you're taking care of the people.
Right. And it also is important to think about it in this way, because especially if you're marketing, if you're investing in marketing and you don't know what's coming in and from a new patient standpoint or what's being accepted, or you don't know where those patients are coming from, how do you even know if you're being successful with the marketing? Are you attracting the right people for your practice and the kind of dentistry you want to provide? If you're not measuring, how do you know what if your investment is really making a positive impact for the practice? And something else that's always interesting to me is how few practices actually don't inform the teams about the practice KPIs, where they are now, and then or even communicating to them where they want to be, those goals for what we want. Your teams, you may be really unhappy with where you are right now. Your teams could really quite possibly think they're doing great if they have no measuring stick to measure their performance and their.
Well, and unfortunately, some of the doctors don't know how well they're doing either.
Right.
Or poorly. So it's important for them to look at the numbers and then share those numbers with the team.
If you want to grow, if you want to change, if you want to get better, you have to know where you are right now to determine any kind of path forward of where you want to go. So key performance indicators, there's so many, and this is just one of them. Where do you stand in the relationships with your patients? A great homework assignment for those of you listening or watching right now could be to go pull that information from your practice management software. How many patients came in this month and the month before and the month before that? How many patients fell out of the bottom, walked out the back door, and not to come back? How many are in active hygiene retention this month? How many are, how is your treatment acceptance and that patient acceptance of diagnosed treatment? And then look at that in terms of where you are now and where do you want to go, and focus as a team, setting some goals and some action plans on how to get there. So thanks, Dru.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Jameson Files. Visit us online at jmsn.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Spotify. Do you have questions or topics you'd like for us to answer or cover on the next podcast? Email us at podcast@jmsn.com.